This is a Pyramid One International Network presentation. Hi, and welcome to Pyramid One Radio. Let me tell you about your host. Her name is Lori Ann Spagna. Lori is a best-selling author, speaker, spiritual teacher, ascension guide, multi-dimensional channel, intuitive, animal communicator, energy healer, light worker, visionary, and luminary who assists others to awaken their alignment with the true divine source which exists within each and every being, so that all beings can live in their best life ever. As a spiritual teacher, visionary, light worker, star seed, intuitive, and healer who radically transformed her life after a series of near-death experiences while living in Maui, Lori teaches about ascension and acts as a guide to awaken spiritually minded animal lovers, light workers, star seeds, and way showers. For over 20 years, Lori has transformed the lives of thousands of humans and animals via her channeled ascension guidance, intuition, sacred energy healing, and animal communication and telepathy. She provides ascension training and support, sacred energy healing transmissions, dormant DNA activations, and sacred key code activations for humans and animals. For more information and for free MP3 classes entitled Are You a Light Worker? And What is a Star Seed? Developing your intuitive gifts, learn animal communication and telepathy, and awaken your dormant DNA, plus a free, juicy, living ebook. Visit www.lorispagna.com. That's www.lorispagna.com. Now, may I introduce to you, to the world, to the universe, Lori Spagna.
Hello, and welcome to the show tonight. Hi, Bob. How you doing?
Hey, what are we doing tonight?
Oh, my goodness. We have the most awesome show, I think, ever. Everyone's going to love it. I just want to welcome everyone who's listening live and also in delayed playback. I'm so happy and glad to be with you here tonight live. Bob, you look fabulous.
Do I?
I can see you. Yeah.
Oh, yes, you can see me now. Yeah, see, I got the...
I can see you through video.
With the thing with
You look awesome. Well, I'm really excited about our show tonight. I want to share a couple of announcements before we bring our guest on. And I know people are going to love our guest tonight. Wow, I'm so amazed about our guest. But before I introduce him, let me just say these quick announcements. First is tomorrow evening, which is Tuesday, I want to let you know if you are interested in joining us on the live webinar, which is also available in replay for our speed activations call. So what speed activations is we're awakening our dormant DNA, aspects and parts of our dormant DNA. This particular speed activations call will be focused on parts of our of the light codes within us. They're coded into our DNA, and they get activated when we choose to awaken them within us. to help us shift as we're evolving into our light bodies. So these are light codes that are associated with the solar aspects of our light bodies that need to be awakened so that our bodies can evolve through this rapidly transformational time on planet Earth. We are shifting out of physical bodies. That does not mean we don't keep our physical bodies. It does. But our bodies need to become light bodies. And this is part of the evolution of humanity. It includes animals as well. So we need to awaken these light codes within us, these dormant light codes that are coded into our DNA. That is what tomorrow's webinar is about. So for people who are interested in joining us and learning more and activating these within yourself, tomorrow night is the quarterly speed activations call. Now, the way to join us, if you would like to, through webinar, no matter where you are in the world, is to head over to LoriSpagna.com under the live events tab and just look for speed activations. And you can register to join us there. And again, it's done through webinars. So no matter where you are in the world, you'll have access to it. And you don't have to be on the call live to participate. You just need to register, and then you get the call access information. You can listen in replay, and it works just as effectively in replay because we're working with the non-physical realms and aspects of the divine, which is infinite, unlimited from time or space, or by time and space. So please join us for that. That's at LoriSpagna.com, speed activations call. You can access it through the events tab. The other two big events I want to mention are, if you're local in the South Florida area, this Friday, May 18th, I am offering a gifted evening, gifted for the community. We do light work, activations, healings, clearings, intuitive guidance and support, benevolence from the higher realms. Join us. We are in the physical form. Friday, May 18th, I will be live at the Unity Church in Jupiter, Florida. And that is a gifted event. It is the last gifted event I will be offering like that in this local area. So if you're listening and you'd like to join us, please come in and join us physically in person. That's this Friday, May 18th, live at Unity Church in Jupiter, Florida. That is listed on my website under LoriSpagna.com/events. You can get the link and get all the information. Then finally, one other live event I want to tell you about is this Sunday, May 20th. I will be speaking live on Inner Journey Radio with Greg Friedman, who is an incredible spiritual teacher, leader, and radio show host. So I'm really excited about that. And that's this Sunday, May 20th. We'll be taking live callers and Q&A and just really exploring. It's a 2-hour show. So again, you can find out the details on that at LoriSpagna.com/live events. It's all under the live events tab, all of this. So those are my 3 big announcements. And then I just want to mention our next guest on this show, Pyramid One, is the very famous and really amazing channel, Magenta Pixie. So be on the lookout for her call coming up. And then after Magenta Pixie, we also have coming up as one of our guests in the future, my dear friend, Jeneth Blackert, who will be sharing with us. And then Danielle Brooks coming up. So that's all coming up in the next few weeks. And those guests, of course, are listed also under the live events tab at LoriSpagna.com. Plus, I know they'll be listed on Pyramid One. Bob makes sure he posts all of our upcoming guests. And remember, you can always catch replays of all of our shows on the replays page, right, Bob? All the replays of all the calls are available in the archives. Isn't that right?
Yes,
Good.
They are.
Right. So if you want to go back and catch a guest at one of our shows from the past, you can catch that on the archives page at Pyramid One. So, all right, but without any further ado, I want to bring on tonight's guest. And I think you guys are going to love what he shares. His name is Peter Tung. And he is so fascinating and just a captivating and really interesting speaker. So let me introduce you to Peter and just tell you a little bit about Peter Tung. He spent 30 years in 2 top-ranking independent schools in Canada and the UK. And he uses his wealth of experience to gain a profound understanding of the complexities of the human condition. For the past 12 years, Peter has been engaged in counseling individuals and groups in resolving their difficulties in life, as well as assisting them in awakening to their own spiritual path. His heart-centered understanding of science and spirituality offer a vital and powerful pathway to successful living in this chaotic and confusing time. For 5 years, Peter hosted a weekly radio show, Awakening to Conscious Co-Creation, on the Seventh Wave Network of Voice of America. By the way, I was a guest on that show a few years ago. He interviewed experts in their respective fields within the central theme of understanding higher consciousness. For the last 4 years, Peter has been helping people gain an understanding of gene keys, the gene keys process, through one-on-one counseling sessions and group workshops. His website is Peter Tung. I'm going to spell it. It's PeterTongue.com. And you can also learn more about the Gene Keys at genekeys.com. I just want to bring him on now. He's so wonderful. And he gave me an incredible reading. Peter, are you with us? Are you there?
I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Yes, indeed.
Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here with us. So I want to talk to people about what you do, and I'm going to also share some of my own personal experience since you gave me such an incredible reading. But before we go into that, tell us some of the background on how all of this fascinating journey unfolded for you.
Okay, well, thank you. I was a relatively normal guy to begin with in England, rugby coach, chemistry teacher, beer drinking guy. And I was always on a spiritual path behind the scenes, and eventually emigrated to Canada through rugby, actually, and came to a school on Vancouver Island where I took over running the boarding program of the students, still coaching rugby, still teaching chemistry. And a beautiful thing happened, and that was the so-called indigo children started coming to me to tell me what they knew beyond the norm. And I eventually became the principal of that school, 500 students, grade 9 through 12. And so I started this journey with these children of getting an understanding, profound understanding of what they knew beyond the ken. And it was typically precognitive dreams. They would have dreams and know things were going to happen in the future, and then they did, which is an awesome thing, but it's also a scary thing. And so I was able to help them come to terms with what they knew. And there were all sorts of aspects. They'd see auras around people. They could see past lives in people. It was just an incredible wealth of information that I started to gather. And I realized that the current school system just doesn't work for these children. They don't learn in the traditional logical sequential way. They learn more through a Mandela type approach to life. And so I made this crazy decision. It's now in my 13th year, which is pretty amazing, that I made the decision to leave the best job in the world. I had a wonderful job, wonderful school, but I just knew this wasn't really what it was about. And so I made this brave, courageous, crazy decision to leave and go on my true spiritual mission, which I did, and continued to develop an understanding through actual physical alchemy at the furnace, through helping people make transitions when they crossed over, and just really developing this background knowledge, which of course at the time I didn't know, was to help prepare me for what was to come. And that was 4 years ago when I had this serendipitous meeting with Richard Rudd. As you said, Laurie, I interviewed you back in June 2013. It was actually on the eve of the 666, funnily enough, June the 6th, 2013, which was a 6th year. And so as a result of that show, I did tons of interviews and eventually decided to stop because I was getting saturated mentally and it wasn't I knew it wasn't the real journey, which was to do my own inner work. And then one of the last interviews I did in April 2014 was with Richard Rudd, and I knew nothing about the Gene Keys. And we had the interview just like we are now. And as a result of that, I looked into the Gene Keys. And the reason I did that interview with Richard was because he was coming to North America, to Canada, to Vancouver, to the Bay Area, and to Portland to do 3 workshops. So he did the Vancouver workshop and went to go to Portland and got stopped at the border. Best decision the American border guards ever made. They didn't let him into the country, so he turned back and he did his Portland workshop, 2-day workshop from his hotel room in Vancouver, emailed me and said, I've had a bit of a drama, can I come over? So the next thing I know is Richard was actually in my house, having come from the southwest of England, supposedly in America, which he now was not. So I realized at that moment that this was a really important serendipitous meeting I needed to pay attention to. And that began the journey with the Gene Keys 4 years ago, which has led me on the journey that I'm on right now, which is with the Gene Keys very closely.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about these Gene Keys, but I just want to say, one could say, first of all, I'm an indigo. You know, I call myself a cusp indigo crystal child, right on the cusp, kind of. And I am so with you on what you said. Like the school system, I remember in the school system being just so bored and so like not interested in my learning has all happened. My real learning in life has happened outside of a traditional school system. I love that you said that part about the indigos. But I also love what you said about it being serendipitous, because you could say that the whole purpose for that radio show, in a sense, Peter, was to get you to that point where you met Richard Rudd. And then after that was done, there was no need for you to continue on that journey because the purpose of that radio show had been fulfilled, in a sense, or one of the higher purposes.
Oh, no, I totally agree. Totally agree with you. That's a great insight, yes.
Yeah, because a lot of times we don't always, our serendipitous moments now are really syncing up. Like our paths for all of humanity, we're syncing up with whatever it is we're really meant to receive so that we can like move forward in these leaps and bounds forward, movement in our soul's agenda so we can evolve really quickly, And anyway, it's a good story what you shared. I like that. So, all right. So tell us, first help us to understand for people who don't know what the Gene Keys are, help us understand, like, what is that? Give us an overview of what it is and how it works.
Okay. So first of all, let me explain then. It was Richard had this experience where he was in an altered state for 3 full days, didn't eat, didn't sleep, and was shown in this 3-day period how creation took place through the Chinese, the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, and how those 64 hexagrams are the way in which creation takes place, including human evolution. And another part of that experience was the recognition that the 64 codons in our DNA are precisely the same as those 64 hexagrams. And so it took Richard 7 years to bring into form a process or a system that would help us decode or unravel the shadow frequencies that we live by according to our childhood conditioning, the moment of conception, which is when our parents conceived us and imprinted into us the sacred wound of the ancestors. So this is all about, it was interesting you were talking before about the activation of the dormant DNA, because this is exactly what this involves. It involves clearing the shadow frequencies which block our perception of those dormant DNA strands. So those strands are there, the connection to the DNA is always there, but what blocks us from experiencing that higher frequency are the shadow frequencies that got imprinted into us in our childhood and then continue to play out these conditioned programs in our life. And so we go around this loop of repetitive emotional patterns, repetitive thinking patterns, which also end up into some form of physical ailment or disease. And so what the Gene Keys is about your own personal profile, where out of the 64 hexagrams, and therefore the 64 gene keys, there are 11 that relate specifically to you based upon the moment of your birth, where certain planets were at that moment in time. And they fit into this profile to give you an overview of the frequencies that you are dealing with in your life from this low-level shadow frequency that keeps us trapped or frozen in these lower frequencies, and how we can transform those frequencies out of the shadow and into the gift frequency, which is the way in which we want to live our lives on a daily basis in a place of peace and contentment. There is a third level, which is called the Siddhi frequency, and this is like the divine essence. And these higher frequencies really choose their moment when to descend upon us and to bring us into these elevated states of joy, of bliss, of peace, of harmony, of unconditional love. And we can't really make those things happen. So what we are doing really is going on our own grail quest to transform and transmute those lower shadow frequencies into the gift frequencies, so that we are living by these gift frequencies in our lives, such that we've prepared ourselves for when those cities, those divine essences want to descend upon us, we're ready to accept them. We've prepared ourselves for those sacred moments.
Yes. I love the way you just explained it. And I want to help people understand, since I just literally had a reading from you, which is so incredible. I just want to say that this is like candy for the soul that really wants to evolve through understanding your personal experience, your soul's journey, and being able to transcend it as quickly or effortlessly and benevolently as possible. Like, it's almost like a map in my perspective, like as an experiencer of it, who has not studied it the way you have. It's like, okay, these are your lower frequencies, your denser shadow aspects. Like, they might be issues with control or distraction or being too serious or feeling inadequate or self-doubt or things like that. And those shadow aspects are what, by becoming conscious of them, then there's these tools within there as well that you get to use so that you can transcend them and elevate yourself energetically to these higher frequencies. That's my experience. Would you agree the way I just interpreted that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just explain how it does actually work, because it's actually set up and laid out for you, because Richard himself has written a book called The Gene Keys. And in that book, he describes the shadow, the gift, and the siddhi of each of these 64 gene keys. So you don't read the book like a book, cover to cover. You read it according to the order of your 11 gene keys. So what actually happens is, when you're reading that particular chapter in the book, which is one of your gene keys, you're getting a mental understanding of what that gene key represents. One of the challenges in the whole process in our lives is the mind is very good at creating a cover story to cover up any earlier childhood suffering we went through. So we need to get underneath that mind to get down into the emotional body and the physical body. So what happens is, as a result of reading that chapter, because this is an energetic transmission, it's not just reading and understanding, there's actually an energetic shift taking place within us. So what happens is, the energy of that particular gene key now comes up into our awareness. So now we're back out in the world and we're moving through the world and stuff happens. But now, because we've read that chapter in the book and we understand what the shadow is, we start catching ourselves acting in that shadow. So it's the repetitive patterning that's taken place since childhood. And so now we catch ourselves, we breathe and we pause and we step out of that pattern. And then eventually what happens is we catch ourselves just before we start the pattern. It's a beautiful moment, because now we won't repeat that pattern, and then there's an actual physical change in the DNA, so that we step out of that shadow into the gift, and we'll never repeat that pattern again. So as you move through the 11 chapters in the book, which are your 11 gene keys, so you're slowly but surely working your way through these shadow frequencies. It's rather like a set of Russian dolls where you start off at the core and you put a one on top of that, and another one on top of that, another one on top of that. So you can't actually get down to the core because you're so distanced from it through the shadow frequencies. So the process then is about lifting off each of these Russian dolls through a process through the spheres until you get down to the very, very core, which is this ancestral wounding that we are carrying on behalf of our ancestors. And then from there you set yourself free from the conditioning that you've been living under, and that now brings you back out into the world in how you're going to offer yourself in service out in the world for the rest of your life.
I love that. And it's so true, because everything I always teach about with the DNA activations that I've been doing DNA activations for people for over 10, and animals actually, for over 10 years. And I'm always saying, like, the first 2 strands of DNA are the wounds of our ancestors, the story that our ancestors gave us that we took on either through our belief or our disbelief or our judgment or whatever. Somehow we entangled with our ancestors, and that's the records in the first 2 DNA, the 2 strands of DNA. So basically it's laid out here for us in these gene keys. It's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. So, all right. So tell us some examples, if you would, about like some of the different charts that you've read. Is that the right term? Chart?
Profile.
Okay. Yeah. So tell us some of the stories of what's been revealed through some of these profiles. I mean, I know what's been revealed in mine, but what have you discovered that have really helped people to really shift out of their shadow aspects and vibrationally align with their what we might call pearl aspects, or the true essence of what they're meant to become?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that just amazes me all the time is how accurate the profile is. And so the profile gives you 2 numbers. It gives you the number of the gene key that you're operating on, and then it gives you the line of the hexagram that you're operating on in that gene key. So the line corresponds to the chakras. So line 1 is the base chakra. Going through, the 2nd is the sacral, 3 the solar plexus, 4 the heart, 5 the throat, 6 both chakras in the head. So this is the sort of theme that you live out your life through that gene key. And because the Venus sequence, the 2nd sequence of the 3, focuses on your childhood development, I can look at a particular gene key in a particular line, and I can ask a question which just blows people away. How could you possibly know that? So a good example would be someone who has a line 1 in their EQ, which is the emotional development between the age of 8 and 14. If they have a line 1 EQ, then I can say to them, something happened between the age of 8 and 14 where you lost some confidence in life as a result of something that happened, which leads you to self-sabotage yourself now in this lifetime. And so immediately, most people know exactly what it is. Some people, they have to go into it in a deeper contemplation. But the fact that you've triggered that awareness within them, that enables them to access that piece of information. And typically, if it's in the EQ, the emotional body, it's a program that runs in life today, which is still causing some self-sabotaging. So it's important for that person then to really look deeply into what that event was, what took place. And what a lot of people forget is what happened to us as a child. We are stuck in that developmental stage, in that particular situation. So we're still feeling or acting in a way that reflects that particular age. In other words, when that aspect of us gets triggered, we revert back to being a child of that age. And we can't come at it from an emotionally mature adult perspective. And so by asking these questions of what I call idle curiosity, we can unravel situations. I'll give you another very specific example. The 29th and 30th gene key are a programming pair. The 30th gene key, the shadow, is desire. And this is the fire of desire. And so people who have the 30th gene key out of balance, they have too much fire energy, and therefore they too much yang energy, too much masculine energy. And what that tends to lead to are digestive issues and heartburn and acid reflux type situations. So if I see someone with a prominent 30th gene key in their profile, or the pair of them together, I will ask the question, do you have heartburn problems, or do you have acid reflux or digestive problems? And they just say to me, how can you possibly know that? And so then I can not only can we recognize that, but we can actually solve it. There's a process which brings that person back into balance in their yang and yin energies. And we've just gone through a period earlier this year in March where the fire energy on the planet was enormous, when there were all these planets in Aries, and the sun was in Aries, and everybody was sort of exploding over the top with this fire energy. And so there's an opportunity then to heal and recognize that through this particular process. So not only are we finding out for people what's running the show underneath, but also how we can resolve things for them.
Yeah. That's incredible. So could I ask you about the different gene keys, since they all correspond to a number? Are those gene keys like, as they're, because we know from a higher perspective, there's never better or worse. It's just different things that we embody or are here to work through or work on. But in other words, what are the gene keys themselves, the numbers themselves? Do they have some kind of pattern, or the way that I ask this, what I'm trying to find out is, if you have a gene key of 21, or you have a gene key of 52, or if you have a gene key of 35, or whatever it is, what is the symbology of that gene key in terms of a soul? Like, is there better or worse in terms of desirable or undesirable? Is it just talk more about that, what they represent?
Yeah, I'm following you, and some people are often keen to know, is the bigger number worse or better? And that isn't the case, because every one of the gene keys, they're just different sets of qualities. So each gene key, every single one of them has a shadow, a gift, and a siddhi. So every one of them has its challenge, and every one of them has its gift, and every one of them has its divine essence. There are some that you might consider darker than others, but when you look at the most difficult shadow frequency, and I will talk about one in a moment, when you look at the most difficult shadow frequency, it leads to the greatest gift. So a good example.
That's so nice to hear. Let's just rephrase. Let's say that again. Can you just say that again? It's so beautiful.
I was just saying that there are some gene keys that have a more challenging shadow, a deeper shadow. But the beautiful thing about that is, the deeper the shadow, the greater the gift and the greater the siddhi. So when you can work through that shadow, then you can reach, higher states of awareness and consciousness. I'll use one example, which is the 28th gene key. The 28th gene key is the gene key that is illuminated by the sun over Halloween. So it's a Scorpio gene key, and the shadow frequency of that gene key is purposelessness. It's a funny word. What it means is, people with the 28th gene key have almost certainly had to face the deepest fear anybody could possibly have. And that could be the fear of dying. It can be the fear of a great loss. It can be the death of a loved one at a particular time in your life. And it takes people to this place of, what's the point? Why should I bother? There is no point. And that's the shadow of purposelessness. And it pushes you right to the edge. And you build this figure, this demonic figure of fear in your field. And it's often connected to an ancestral wounding as well. For example, it could be the fear of your whole tribe being wiped out, your genetics just disappearing. So it's some major, major deep-seated fear. But when you can face that fear and transmute that fear, then what you do is you begin to live your life in totality. So instead of being purposelessness, you're now living your life with total purpose, that you're full on, and just magical things start to happen. And the highest expression of that gene key is immortality. So you go from being terrified of death to being completely comfortable with the whole aspect or notion of death. And immortality is something that people don't understand that well. So I'll explain it from my perspective and the gene key perspective, which is that when we die from this world, this body, we are making a transition from this life to the afterlife, where the soul continues to exist. And so what this really is about is transition from physical death into soul existence. So immortality is about dying with complete conscious awareness. So you transition through without losing your conscious awareness. You take it with you, and then you take it into the afterlife and you bring it back into this next life. So you are in complete conscious awareness all the time. That is immortality. Because I don't particularly want to carry this body for the rest of my several thousand years of existence.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That is so incredible. So do you ever look at somebody's profile and just sort of look at them and be like, wow, you've had it made? Does anyone have that?
Well, again, people who've got it made have to usually go through some challenges first. So the first thing I go is, yikes, look at this profile. And then I go, the potential for this person, if they can heal these wounds, is phenomenal. So yes, I do, but you've got to work through everybody has to work through the shadows first. So yes, indeed, there are some people you go, wow, you look at this profile, this person has got a lot on their plate, they've got a lot to work through, but if they can do so, then they're going to move into a beautiful space.
But then, in other words, based on what your experience is with the gene keys, you wouldn't say that there's people, because we could look at some people in the world. I mean, we're learning how, comparison is not a desirable thing in our reality, because we are all on our own unique journey, even though we're dancing and exchanging and entangling with others and resolving things with others, etc. But the key is sometimes we look at some people, especially from the third dimensional reality. You can look at some people who are, maybe on TV or, famous people or whatever, and it seems like they have it all made. Like they've just got this perfect, wonderful life. But what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, is you've never looked at a gene keys profile and seen that. You see the totality of their life. That means that would, by default, indicate that no one's got it totally made. Everyone has to work through shadow of some kind.
Absolutely, including Richard Rudd and me.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. But the point is, it's a really important point that you've made, though, because one of the things we have to be aware of is people who appear to have it made don't have to dive deeply into their shadows to resolve them. So there actually is a disadvantage. That may sound like that's a paradox. So those people who have struggled in their lives and had challenges, they have to look into their lives to see what it is that's causing them so much suffering and pain.
Right.
Whereas people who have a very easy life, they just sail through life without ever really looking deeply into themselves.
I mean, I so appreciate that you say that, because I'm a person who has dealt with a lot of shadow aspects. And it's been very challenging, but I really understand. I really get it that I have used that to serve and support and assist others in their healing journey. It's just that working with the shadow aspects isn't always so fun. It's not the most fun. So you kind of, it's helpful to understand that there's higher purpose to that. And it's also helpful to realize that even for people who don't necessarily have it, it's just that they're not necessarily able to use that, or there's a disadvantage to it. But nonetheless, I mean, it's such a great thing that you can look at someone's personal profile and see their gene codes and bring in so much enlightenment to that person who's sort of the seeker or someone who's searching for a way to heal and resolve their own issues that they face in their life. This is like their personal profile helps them to do that.
It also takes some of the emotional charge out of their situations, because they begin to realize that it was inevitable that I was going to have to go through this situation to get an understanding of myself and my life. So it sort of takes away the emotional charge of what the person has had to deal with when they begin to understand and see that this was part of their journey that they chose to go through, to experience, so that they could raise themselves into a higher frequency of existence. So you begin to see it from a different perspective. Your perception of what it is shifts. And
Yes.
however traumatic your childhood may have been, for example, but there is a gift in that. And when
Yes.
you can see that gift, then that's what helps the transformation.
Yes.
I just want to talk about a couple of specific gene keys in a minute. If you don't mind, I just want to comment upon what you said about your own life, because the way that I knew that was true for you was because you have line 3 in 3 areas of your profile during your life development. And line 3 is very much connected to the way you describe your own life, which is people who have a lot of line 3s are those people who've chosen to come into this life and experience life in all of its different variations. So it's like you are your own soap opera.
That's so true. That's true.
And the people
Right.
around you behave in these incredibly tumultuous emotional ways, and they're like big waves of energy. Some of them are phenomenally wonderful, and some of them are incredibly challenging. And so the reason that you would choose several line 3s in your life would be to get a deep and profound understanding of the human condition living here on the planet. And so it's important, therefore, for those people not to be resentful of those who appear to have an easier life, because you didn't choose that route. You chose the route of understanding humanity from all of its different aspects, the very, very best and the very, very worst. But there are 2 gene keys I just wanted to comment.
And then wait, can I just ask you,
Yeah.
based on that, the higher purpose of choosing to understand all of humanity and all of its different aspects is to be of service in a higher and better way. Is that true? Would you say that's true?
It's a deep and loving compassion for people, yes. I seem to remember, didn't you talk in our radio show about the compassionate gene?
Yes.
Well, that's what this
Yeah.
is. That's what
Yeah.
this is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Thanks for that.
activating the compassionate gene in people through the suffering of themselves and others around them.
Right. So I want to hear about those other 2 gene keys.
Yeah.
I just want to insert this one thing for anyone also who has ever felt like they weren't understood. I mean, I'm a person who has felt a lot of my life that others didn't understand. They couldn't understand. And a lot of us light workers and way showers who go through some really challenging stuff, we feel like no one else understands. And I mean, I feel like one of the best gifts I can offer is that I understand. But this, for me, when you looked at my profile, I felt understood. And that's such a huge gift to be able to give to people, because most people don't understand other people's journeys. So for anyone who feels that need, having their gene code really looked at, their personal profile looked at by you, Peter, I think is so incredible, such a gift, because you will feel understood. Peter will help you feel understood. That's one thing I know. All right, but tell us those other 2 aspects you were going to share.
Before I do, I'll just comment upon what you just said, and I'll get onto those too, because, again, my experience with the children who were the indigo children was that, and this is you as well, by the way, in your family, and that was you actually were a threat to the family, because you come into this life knowing more than you're supposed to. So the people who are living their mundane 3D world lives feel very threatened by people who come in and know more than they should, particularly as little children. So sadly, what tends to happen for those indigo children is they become scapegoats for the family,
Right.
and they get the blame for everything.
Yes.
That's actually the shadow of the 45th gene key, which is the shadow is domination. But the siddhi of that gene key is communion, and the gift is synergy. So what it's about is shifting from that old patriarchal, hierarchical, push someone down on a lower rung of the ladder than I'm on, to a hierarchical structure where everybody is considered equal and has an equal say, and everybody is trusted with their own piece of the puzzle. So we can put the puzzle together and create synergy, which is beyond the individual components of the whole, to create something bigger and better. So this is the way the gene keys works, is you just can recognize patterns of human life and help people understand what it was all about and why it happened the way that it did. So I just want to come back to those two gene keys, which I wanted to talk about, because the 22nd gene key is probably Richard's favorite expression, is suffering is grace. And what he means by that is when we can see any suffering that we've gone through in our lives and see the blessing or the gift within that suffering, that then transforms and transmutes that suffering into grace. And divine grace is the highest expression that we can embody in this physical lifetime. And so when you can begin to understand that whatever suffering, whatever it was you went through, one of the biggest qualities I personally think is so important for now is the quality of resilience. And when you've gone through challenges in your life and had to deal with that and step up and look after yourself, then that's one of the ways in which resilience builds in people. And the 22nd gene key is the more esoteric gene key of all 64. And it's about the down and in journey. And I want to talk about this because there's a lot of misunderstanding about the spiritual journey, where people tend to focus on the kundalini rising energy moving up the spine and out through the top of the head and having these extraordinary experiences. Whereas there's an equally important journey, which is the down and in journey, which is the 22nd gene key. So this is about bringing the higher frequencies in, our higher self, incarnating more into the form by descending this energy down deep into the body. So it's really important for us not to try and escape this body, but to bring the higher consciousness, the greater awareness down and into our body. And I'm not sure if your listeners will be aware, Laurie, of the Schumann resonance.
Yes.
Which is the heartbeat of Mother Earth, and the fact that it's been shifting recently in the last year or so. And what this is about then is Mother Earth trying to entrain us to a new brainwave pattern of a higher level of awareness. And so embodying this frequency and bringing it down and in is really, really important. And the timing is divine, because tomorrow we move into the new moon in Taurus, and at exactly the same time, Uranus, the planet, is moving into Taurus. And I'll just describe that a little bit, because it's going to be really interesting what happens. But Uranus spends 84 years going around the whole astrological wheel. So it spends about 7 years in each of the different signs. So it has been in the sign of Aries for the last 7 years. And this is all about sudden and disruptive, shaking everything up, change. And in our case, in Aries, was about our personal freedom. So we've been encouraged to find our own personal freedom over this last 7 years. And many, many people have done that. And that included the 2012 date that people got all excited about. But it was also an opportunity for us to find this freedom. So tomorrow, while the Sun and Moon are conjunct in Taurus, Uranus is moving into Taurus. And so now this is about Mother Earth's own freedom. It's about her own journey. And so this is going to be really interesting what happens over the next 7 years, because there is this potential for this tremendous shift into a higher frequency for Mother Earth herself, and for us to go through that with her. So there is this potential opportunity. And again, in your introduction, you talked about the solar aspects of our light bodies, and that's just beautifully synchronistic, because this is what we're talking about. It's about us stepping into our light body while still in physical form, and Mother Earth doing the same thing. So we can transition together into this higher frequency through our physical bodies and our light body coming together in this higher frequency while Mother Earth is doing the same. And so connecting to these deep, deep energies of Mother Earth herself and spending time out in nature and just sitting with her and being with her. And that is the 15th gene key. The 15th gene key talks about the Schumann resonance. But the other gene key I wanted to talk about was the 55th gene key, which is the gene key of the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And the shadow frequency of the 55th gene key is victimhood. And it steps up into freedom. So the journey that we're now on as we enter the age of Aquarius is to set ourselves free from the shadow frequencies of the Piscean age, which is the 37th gene key, which is about the creation of the shadow frequencies of self-sacrifice, martyrdom, and victimhood. See, the Piscean age was all about the Christ consciousness being embodied on the planet through Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, walking the earth as a living Christed consciousness being, both of them. And the shadow frequency of that era was the oppression of the feminine, was the suppression of the feminine, because the masculine energy was terrified of the natural power of the feminine when she was in her free state. So that has come to an end, thank goodness. The 37th shadow of weakness has come to an end, such that now we can all step out, our feminine sides can all step out of that victimhood and step up into freedom created through this dawning of the age of Aquarius. And so it's a beautiful opportunity for us to set ourselves free from any oppression, suppression, as we were talking in your profile, mediocrity we talked about earlier, in setting ourselves free to be absolutely true to our true nature.
Wow. Peter, what you just said, I have to listen to that over again. That was so fantastic. I'm just blown away by the way you just spoke. And I just think that's so incredible. And I have to say on a personal note, absolutely love hearing a man who's in his power, his inner power, speak about the divine feminine, because there's just still, there's so much more awakening of that and birthing of that to go on for the male species, because the male gender, I should say, not species, because women have been doing that. Like, we're birthing the divine feminine and we're balancing it with our own inner masculine. But there's a lot of men out there that are sort of a little slower because the spiritual movement tends to be a more feminine, energetic. And as we birth it, I don't know, these are just my perspectives. They're not absolute truths, obviously, but it's just lovely to hear a man say it. And that's all I need to say in that way.
Let me just add a little bit more, because this is an experience I've gone through in the last few years in working closely with the feminine in the work that I do. And what I've noticed, Laurie, is when the masculine energy steps back and allows the feminine to take over and step up into her full creative, intuitive self, it's so much easier. Mm-hmm. All the male energy has to do is let go of the need to control things and fix things and just allow the feminine to come through. So when I'm involved in sacred ceremony now, I just step back and allow the feminine frequency, the female people in my life, to step forward and use their creative, softer, gentler approach. And it works just absolutely beautifully. So all the male energy needs to do is to let go of the need to control things, and it works out way better. And it's much easier for everybody.
Yeah. That's just so beautiful. I'm just so happy to hear you speak. I can't tell you, because it's like the female embodiment of women are really, we are so holding space as best as we can for the male embodiment to bring forward that balanced approach, that consciousness that you just verbalized. And you are you are obviously doing it. So that just makes me so happy. Let me remind people about your website. It's Peter Tongue, PeterTongue.com. And I want to tell people too, aside from getting sessions with you, there's some incredible stuff on your site that's just really beautiful. Free gifts under the meditation tab. I mean, I clicked around this week because I wanted to know. I mean, I know you, but I haven't looked at your website in quite a while. And over the past week, I was listening to some of it and just tuning in on your web. There's some great stuff there for people to really enjoy, including some free meditations. One for finding deep inner peace during tumultuous time, which is really beautiful, and another for deep rejuvenating sleep. And then, of course, there's something there as well about you do sacred journeys, right? I remember seeing that. Tell us about the sacred retreats you offer. 7 Sacred Seals retreats. Talk about that.
Yeah, sure. There's 2 different types of retreat. One would be when we take people on sacred site journeys to different parts of the Western world, typically, and we do that ceremonially and taking people. So we've been down to Mount Shasta in California, to the Canadian Rockies. This last year, we actually stayed at home and went to the heart center of our own island, which was just a phenomenal experience. So we take groups of people on those sacred site tours. That's slightly different from the retreats that we do through the Gene Keys. So the 7 Sacred Seals is the more mystical, esoteric transmission through the 22nd Gene Key. And so we actually spend time working with all 6 core wounds of all of humanity. So through the 6 lines, every member of humanity's family lineage resonates on one of those 6 wounds. So the 7 Sacred Seals is a retreat that we do to take people through those 6 wounds where they experience themselves what it feels like to be in that wound. And then we transmute that on their behalf, or they do it themselves on their own behalf, which then translate for the whole of humanity itself. It's a beautiful journey that we take people on. And again, because of what we just talked about, I work with Zia, who's a shamanically trained Aquero belief system. So we work together as a male-female team to find that balance, to offer that balance to all the people that we work with. So yeah, it's a very profound process. We've actually led that retreat 4 times now, and it's just a very, very powerful mystical experience. The people that want to go beyond, the physical realm and take it into the next level of frequency, it's a wonderful transmission.
Yeah, that sounds fabulous. That just sounds so incredible. And people can see all about your different retreats under the events tab at your website at PeterTongue.com. So I want to ask you, just going back to what you were mentioning before about, since we have a few minutes left, we have about 5 minutes or so left. You mentioned Uranus going into Taurus, which happens tomorrow, and that's going to create a lot of unexpected change around, Mother Earth liberating herself and really offering up to us. Do you want to become vibrationally? So the way I perceive it, in dialogue with the consciousness of Mother Earth, is that she's basically going to ask us during the next, 7 years, hey, do you want to become vibrationally compatible with me? This is your choice. And do you want to harmonize with me? But I'm curious if that's similar. And what would you, in your consciousness, what would you want to share on that? Anything else on that topic area about this big change that's coming with respect to that?
Yeah, there's an interesting tension here, because Taurus is all about the status quo and being solid and grounded and dependable and reliable, and Uranus is all about disrupting and shake and bake and make things happen. So there's this tension that's been created over this next period of time. But what I do think is there's going to be some things that will happen, one of which I think we're going to see some remarkable new technologies coming through to help us restore Mother Earth to her pristine nature. I think there is going to be a shift in focus over this period of now us caretaking Mother Earth much better than we have done recently. And that there are going to be these indigo children that you mentioned are now, many of them are in their 30s and 40s, and they are now going to be the people to have these incredible innovative ideas to bring new technologies through to help us return Mother Earth to her pristine nature. So that's a big piece. Another big piece is going to be a big shift in the financial area, because again, we've gone through this very dominating time, and now Uranus in Taurus is about our own personal resources and our financial freedom. So I think we're going to see a big shift in the way in which finances work in our lives. And that could engage things like cryptocurrencies that now give us the opportunity to take responsibility for ourselves rather than the banks using our money for their own gain. And then the other thing I think is going to be very important is for us to really assess our own values. You know, what is really important to me? Why am I really here? And simplifying our lives and focusing on what's really important rather than all the distractions and clutter that we tend to live our lives by. So I think we're going to see a movement towards simplifying, a movement towards living closer with the land itself, new forms of agriculture. I think we're just going to see a deep and profound connection between humanity and the animals and Mother Earth.
Love that. I was noticing that even in my house last night. We were after Mother's Day dinner, and I don't drink any alcohol, but my family does. And they had these bottles of wine, empty bottles in the garbage. And I stuck my hand in there and I was like, why are these not being recycled? And I realized, that's just their state of consciousness. They don't think about the earth. And I didn't lecture them or anything. I just said, all it requires is for us to care. And that is exactly symbolic. I think people will actually start thinking, even on a very simple level, of that caring. Do we really care? Do we care? So, Peter, I think you are just wonderful. I love you so much. I think you're so fantastic. I love what you're doing with gene codes. I'm so grateful to you. I think what you've shared here today is incredibly helpful. I hope people will listen to this again and again. And I want to remind people how they can, just one more time, how they can find you at your website, petertung.com, and they can head over there and get just some incredible gifts. It's free meditations and of course, sign up for your services and learn more about their gene key profile. It's Peter Tung, just like it sounds, TONGUE.com. Peter, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so grateful to you.
Oh, Laurie, it's been an absolute pleasure and great to reconnect with you. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you. And as for me, I'm going to sign off, but I just want to remind people again that if you would like to join us tomorrow for speed activations and activating energetically the codes in your dormant DNA that really bring you and the totality of your divine self online, that activate and awaken the light of the Son of God, the divine source within you, and bring your higher consciousness online, awakened within you. Please join us. This is tomorrow night. We do it quarterly. So, and every time it's different. You don't just do it once. You do it as often as you can to awaken the codes within you. Head over to lauriespagna.com under the live events tab and register to join us for the next speed activation.